Hey there, community bankers. Welcome back to the Correspondent podcast from Independent Correspondent Bankers Bank. I'm your host, Madison Kaplinger, Marketing Specialist for ICBB. The payments landscape is changing quickly, and with it come evolving risks. How can community banks build a payments risk management program that protects themselves and their customers from ever-evolving threats? I interviewed Nanci McKenzie, a payments expert with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, on how your bank can build an effective payments risk management program. Please welcome Nanci to the podcast. Hey there, community bankers. I am here with Nanci McKenzie, who is a payments expert with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. How are you doing today, Nanci?
I am doing great, Madison. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So for our listeners who aren't familiar with you, I know you were at an event for us back in the fall, but for those who haven't met you, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background and all of that?
Sure. As you have mentioned, I am a payments expert at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. So with that, I must say that the opinions are that of myself and not that of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta or the Federal Reserve System. But yes, we had a great time back in the fall in Lexington, Kentucky, and we did a session called Building a Risk Management Program Jenga style. So we played a little Jenga, had a lot of fun. I've been in the financial industry for about 39 years and have worked in the operations of a financial institution, credit union, have done you name it on the deposit side of the bank. I always say I don't do loans, but everything else, that's me. Went into the fintech world and worked for a core processor for a while and did core processing conversions on the deposit side of things. Then I went into a payments association and did audits and risk assessments for financial institutions for about 5 years. Went back to the technical world and did compliance oversight for the fintech and was in charge of their SOC 2 audit and such. And now I'm here at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and I'm a payments expert. I am an AAP and an APRP, which are accreditations with NACHA. And I also hold a Juris Master's degree from Florida State University College of Law in financial regulation and compliance. And I am currently finishing out my master in legal studies at Drexel University College of Law with 2 concentrations, one in financial regulatory compliance and cybersecurity and data privacy. So there you have it.
Wow, yeah. So you have a pretty wide base of knowledge and a lot of degrees, a lot of accreditations. So that makes you the perfect person to talk to and talk through these questions with. I know that payments and payment rails and payment channels have been a big topic the past few years as we've kind of added a few to our financial ecosystem. And there have been, concerns with those and what does this mean for our, compliance and regulatory and all of that. And we're going to dive into that. So in your view, what do you think are the biggest risks community banks face in today's payment landscape, and how have those risks evolved over the past few years?
Yeah, that's a great question because, I have been in this industry for a long time and things have really changed because back when I was on the teller line, teller supervisor, opening new accounts, it was all about the products and the services that the financial institutions could offer. And we really never thought about what risks there were involved. And we really have completely moved through this evolution of change when it comes to how people see their money, move their money, handle their money, and it's all about payments now. Right? It's not about the product and service. We don't really care what type of checking account financial institutions have. Most of us don't even necessarily care what type of checking account. We always were concerned about what fees we might have to pay on a checking account or how many checks we could write without being charged an extra fee. So risk have really come into play because of the way we move our money. We have the ability to do it so quickly. Thus, we have all the topics about instant payments and faster payments. And with that comes along the fact that it might be too fast for us to actually see that there is somebody out there that is a victim of a financial crime, or maybe someone who is adhering to a financial crime and committing a financial crime, right? So being able to identify a risk in our payments ecosystem is becoming more and more challenging because, as you said, Madison, our ecosystem has changed a little bit. We've added different types of payments. It's not just checks, cash, wires. It's electronic payments. It's instant payments. It's a variety of different ways people will access their money and move it to other locations, in and out of their bank, in and out of apps. So these risks have really evolved over the last 25, 30 years, and I don't see it stopping. It's going to continue to keep evolving.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. So you alluded to the fact that as our payments ecosystem evolves, it's kind of harder to keep track of, all the risks that community bankers may face, which brings about the need for them to have a strong risk management program, which you kind of explained really well with Jenga blocks, and that was a really fun way to look at that. But what foundational elements should every community bank have in place to build that strong risk management program for their payments? What are the bottom blocks of the Jenga tower?
Yeah, sure. So, first off, I always want to make it clear that when we're speaking about a risk management program, we're not looking at a siloed effect of a risk management program. We've got risk management programs all across our financial organizations today. 10 years ago, we were talking about risk management, and everybody thought, oh, that's my IT people. That's so we don't have someone hack into our system. Well, yes, those information security programs are risk management programs, but now we have them all across our banks. A lot of financial institutions are implementing enterprise risk management programs. And when you're doing this, the things you need to really consider are the basis of a risk management program, which involves the village, is what I like to say. It's not one person that comes up with the risk management program. We need to get together and communicate with all of those individuals across our organization and determine how are we going to build these programs. We shouldn't be having them all, haphazard and different. We should have some sort of a standard foundation that our financial institution or financial organization are going to identify with, depending on the business lines that we are interested in. What is our customer base? Where are we located? And once we build that understanding of what types of risks we may be exposed to, then we need to keep those risk management techniques going by managing our risk management program. Then we need to monitor that risk management program. Are we still in line? Do we have the right components in our risk management program? And then we should always be, at least on a regular basis, annually at the minimum, or when we have a change in our environment, we're going to need to review and test that risk management program. Make certain that we're still identifying all the risks and we're having the actual mitigation controls in place so that we can reduce the risk to an acceptable level. And that's when we review and test it, then we may have to just revise it. It's what I call, Madison, a rinse and repeat type of a system. Just like you see on the back of your shampoo bottle, it's rinse and repeat. It's constantly going, constantly moving, and it's not something that is just going to be a once and done.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you laid out that process very well, and similar to a lot of processes I understand, there's a review and monitor stage that, tends to be overlooked. But something that I think about a lot is in talking with community bankers, there seems to be this dichotomy almost between, the need to innovate and to keep up with customer preferences and what the fintechs and the big banks are doing, and a sense of caution and, wariness of, all of the risks involved with that innovation. So how can community banks balance the need for innovation in payments with the necessity of a strong risk management program like you outlined?
Yeah, sure. You know, there the competition that our financial organizations face today is much different than what we had, again, 25, 30 years ago. Innovation and having a relationship with third parties is something that many financial institutions are involved in or looking at being involved in. So having a solid strategic plan on how you intend to manage those types of relationships, I think is something that needs to be step one. We need to determine, is this a risk that we are going to want to take? Third-party relationships are risky, and we all have them, regardless if you say, oh, I don't have any third parties that are going to be originating ACH or that are going to be doing wire transfers. If you have a non-consumer relationship where they are offering any type of a product or service to a consumer, that's a third-party relationship. What we need to be aware of and most concerned with for community banks is that the whole purpose behind having a strong risk management program is to validate, to reassure that you have a safe and sound financial organization. That's what it all boils down to, is safety and soundness. And when we see the regulators come in, do their examinations, and we see the consent orders coming out, you see it all over those consent orders. It's about safety and soundness. And that's their job. That's what they need to do to instill a good, strong financial system. So when it comes to community banks, I think that when you look at innovation and adding in either products and services for those that are offering products and services to consumers, or you're bringing innovation to help you manage your risk management program, you need to evaluate those third-party relationships to the degree of what is it that they're offering you, what kind of risks might there be if something terrible, awful, horrible would happen. What would you do in order to not only identify it, but how are you going to recover from it, and how are you going to respond? So you need to have all of those things in place prior to getting into those types of relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And, ICBB is a third-party relationship for a lot of community bankers, and we have third-party relationships as well that we have to evaluate and do our due diligence on. And I like to think we're very transparent with our bank's due diligence processes. And third-party risk is probably among the bigger ones in, our ecosystem right now for payments. But the payment channels themselves also, come with an amount of risks, no matter which one it is. So how can banks assess and mitigate risks across their payment channels that they employ?
Yeah, that's a really tricky thing because there are so many of the financial organizations that have lived in this siloed life for so long that when we're looking at risks in the payment channels, we look at them individually. We can monitor maybe to a certain extent ACH payments. We can monitor to a certain extent wires. We can monitor checks. But each one of them individually. What's key and what's important is that you have some type of a way to manage those risks across the payments channel. Because what we've been seeing in the industry over the past several years now is that we may have a transaction that is coming into your financial institution's customer account in one payment channel, we'll just say ACH, but then it's exiting out in another payment channel. Maybe that might be one of the instant payments or a wire transfer. And seeing that flow of that payment transaction is difficult to see unless you have some way to monitor those transactions across the payments channel. So I get a lot of times, well, how do I do that? Because it's difficult to do because we are so siloed. Now is the time to really start thinking about this. We are seeing the effective dates for ACH monitoring coming up in 2026. Sounds like might be a little bit far away. It's not. It felt like March of 2020 was yesterday, and it was almost 5 years ago. So we need to look at the systems that we have within our financial organizations now to determine how am I going to be able to monitor and see what might be unusual for my customer. Is this transaction normal for them, or is it abnormal? And if it's abnormal, then what are we going to do? How are we going to determine if this is a legitimate, good transaction or not? Do we call them? Well, maybe that might be a good way. Do we look at the transactions on their account to see if it's something that is brand new or is it something they have done before? That might be a good idea. Whatever that process may be, we need to determine what it is, how we're going to investigate it, and what is going to happen if we do determine, hey, this is probably fraud. So preparing now for being able to monitor across those payment channels, it's critical. You should have something in place today, but I know a lot of banking organizations just don't have the capabilities to do that because they are siloed. So that's kind of a message that I've been trying to get out is now's the time. You need to prepare.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit earlier about third parties and, some of the risks inherent there. What role does third-party risk management play in payment security, and especially when banks partner with fintechs and processors and things like that?
Yes, so I think it's really important that if you are in any sort of a third party relationships, that you are well aware of what the interagency guidance has delivered to the industry. First off, there was the interagency approval of the third party relationships risk management that came out June 6th of 2023. Okay, so in this, they have joined together, and when I say the interagencies, I'm talking about the OCC, FDIC, and the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. NCUA is not included in this particular document. However, they do follow suit a lot of times, and I do not speak for the NCUA. I don't know what their stand is specifically on it. I just know that in the past they have followed suit in following the interagency guidance. Within the interagency guidance, they do speak very strongly of making certain that you follow the different standards that they have within their interagency guidance, and know that it rescinds a lot of the former guidance that we had on risk management and on third-party relationships in the past. So be aware that if you are still using some of the guidance from 2008, 2013, you might want to just double check because many of them have been rescinded by this interagency guidance. But they have still within it the third-party relationship life cycle, which includes you need to plan for your risk management, due diligence on the third party, as you had mentioned already, Madison, that you do your due diligence on your third parties. Making certain your contracts have been negotiated, that your legal advisors have reviewed them, that they are well aware of what are in these contracts, and that they are going to be covering the liabilities that are possible when you have these types of relationships. Your ongoing monitoring of that risk management program, and especially your termination with that third-party relationship. Termination is an important part because, just like if you're getting married and now you're going to get a divorce, how does that look? We need to know how we're going to possibly have to terminate that relationship if we feel that there is a need to. Now, there's oversight and governance too, and many times in my career, I have done consulting as well as I've done audits and risk assessments, and I speak to the financial organizations and I look at their policies, and they have the delegation in their policy from their board of directors onto maybe an audit committee or a risk committee. And that's fine, you can certainly do that, but this guidance specifically points out the fact that the oversight is the board of directors' responsibility. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You can delegate the daily stuff if you want within your policy, but know your board of directors have got to have overall oversight of your risk management. And we see this in the consent orders too. They are requiring that development of a risk committee, as well as a compliance committee, as well as we've seen that the board of directors have had to sign the formal agreements to make certain that all of these things are put in place. So that oversight is so very important, that we involve the board of directors and make certain that they are well aware of what kind of relationships we are having and what their risks are that are involved in that. And then making certain that we are doing a review on these relationships on a regular basis, and if there is a change, as well as documentation and reporting on what that activity is. So the guidance really points out all of these very important facts. And one thing I like to just mention, Madison, is that they state specifically, and I'm going to quote from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors copy, but they're all the same, okay? They all word for word are the same. It states, each agency will review its supervised banking organization's risk management of third-party relationships as part of its standard supervisory processes. So this isn't, oh, they might come in and ask you about it. It says they will. So this is no joke. They will. We've seen it. It is happening. And with that, they have come out with a guide. The interagencies came out with a guide to try to help you, because what does this really look like? How do I really put this together? So in May of 2024, they came out with some guidance on that. So I'm sure that if you go to your regulator website, you'll be able to find that guidance. And then just one other thing I want to mention here too is the fact that when it comes to building your risk management program and knowing what you really are going to want to have within that risk management program, ask your regulator. Just come right out and ask them, because they'll tell you, but you're not going to read their mind if you don't ask them. So start by just asking them, and then have that conversation internally. So with those different types of resources, I think that having that risk management program that is going to be in compliance and put you in a place where you can prove that your banking organization is definitely safe and sound is a real good place to start.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like there's a lot of really good guidance out there for how to conduct due diligence on your third-party relationships. I want to step back a little bit to something you said earlier about the tracking transactions across payment channels, and if you have to call the customer to detect fraud and things like that. I know we hear all the time about fraud that's targeting our community banks and their customers, and it seems like it's just ramping up all the time. So in your experience, what are some of the most common fraud schemes targeting community banks in the payment space, and how can they be proactive in defending against them?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones we've seen is the money mule schemes that we've had, where especially through the COVID years, and we had so many of the incentive programs that the government produced, and the unemployment and the PPPs and all of those types of scams. But I believe it was $3 trillion that was lost in exploitation of elders. And that is a lot of the romance scams and that type of thing. And FinCEN had recently come out with some guidance on that. So I think financial crimes overall is just a variety of the fraud that we have been seeing, and that is the main reason why we are seeing so much importance behind having an effective risk management program, is to try to reduce some of these things. Let's face it, the financial institutions, banking organizations, our financial industry has been put into one of the best places to identify where we may see or have fraud, and having some processes in place to help to identify those fraud schemes is just crucial. We need to have that in place, because, face it, it's the responsibility of the financial industry. Like it or not, I know we've got a lot of operations people that are probably listening, and they're like going, oh, this is most of my job anymore. I realize it takes a lot of time. So having those processes in place so that it maybe will put some efficiency on how you handle an identified fraud is going to help with the whole process overall.
Yeah, I think so too. And you touched on this a little bit, but do you have any tips on how community banks might be able to train their employees and their customers too to recognize and prevent payment fraud?
Well, education to your internal staff as well as your customers, it has always been a huge topic and a challenge, right? It always seems, I was a training coordinator for many years at my financial institution, and it always was, there wasn't enough training. Oh, I didn't get trained on that. So it's a challenge, I know it, but getting information to those that are going to be working directly with your customers to be able to identify someone who may be a victim and how they can actually respond to them in convincing them, hey, this is not a good thing. This is a scam, because I know you're having these conversations with people like me, could be your mother, and oh no, it's fine. He really needs the money because his father needs to get out of jail, or whatever the case may be, right? So getting that education to them is a real big challenge, but there are resources out there. ICBB is a great resource. You have a lot of education opportunities for your community banks to take advantage of. And so encouraging a training schedule, process, program of some sort is definitely needed and very important to have as part of your risk management program for sure. But there are a lot of different ways that you can provide education to the customers as well. There's a lot of organizations that have free things available on their websites. One of them being Federal Reserve Bank has some things. We have a risk management section. NACHA has a risk management section. You just need to tap into your resources to determine where you can get those educational opportunities for both internal employees and for your customers.
Yeah, definitely. And if there are any marketers listening, I think, we as bank marketers have a role to play there too in producing educational materials that, maybe will, get to someone before, before the fraud hits or before the fraud attempt is made, and so that they'll be aware of it, or maybe things that might make the conversation a little easier when they get to the front line and, they're asking the teller like, hey, I need to, wire $1,000 to, this foreign country for, uh, reasons
Mm-hmm.
unscrupulous. Um, Another kind of, quandary that community bankers can present is, this, I'll say dichotomy again between you know, keeping their operations efficient and customer friendly, because some of the, compliance and fraud protection things can, present frustrations for customers having to take extra steps and things like that. So how can these banks ensure compliance while keeping their payment operations efficient and customer friendly at the same time?
Yeah, that is a challenge. Um, wouldn't we all love to be able to just have as many resources and ability in our budget to fulfill those resources as we just feel the need, right? So trying to balance that um, lack thereof of budgetary means, of resources, um, maintaining the operations, yet staying customer friendly, having a good customer experience. Um, it takes a lot of talent. And, with that, um, when we were playing Jenga, as you may recall, Madison, I had people at the base of my Jenga tower. I have people at the base because people are the foundation. It's the people that are in your financial organizations that have the experience, they have the abilities, they have the strength to be able to maintain that solid foundation. And unless you provide the resources for them, you're going to end up having people leave. That's too much. I was in operations for about 22 years, and I know the operations people, and I know we've got a lot of operations people listening. Operations are given the task of, you need to get this done. And what are the operations people going to do? We get it done. Well, then, if you're getting it done, why do you need the resources? Because you're driving me insane, right? That's our reason. We need to realize people are our foundation. We give them the resources. And what kind of resources might that be? It may be other bodies, other people. It may be technical solutions. Maybe we need to add in some automation. Maybe we need to provide the ability to have some of our internal systems reevaluated to see if maybe there are some additional resources already available to us that we're not utilizing. So, evaluating our entire resources are going to help with the efficiencies of the operations. Once we have the efficiencies of the operations in control, I think we're all going to be able to give a better customer experience because we're going to be happier. We're going to like our jobs much better. And when you have someone who likes their job, they usually have a smile on their face, and you can hear it in their voice. And customers, even if they've had a bad experience, maybe they're caught up in some sort of a fraud or they've lost some money, if you've got someone who is well trained, well um, controlled over being able to take the time and help them out, it's going to provide a better customer experience. But I think it really all starts with evaluating what kind of resources we're going to have to be made available to our operations people.
Yes, agreed and amen to all of that. I have one final question for you, and this is the type of question that tends to make podcast guests a little nervous. I'm asking you to look into a crystal ball just a little bit, as much as you can. Obviously, none of us can be certain what will happen in the future and give any disclaimers you need to, but based on what you've seen and your expertise, what emerging trends and payments risks do you think community banks should prepare for in the next 3 to 5 years or so? And how can they stay ahead of some of those challenges you see on the horizon?
Boy, yeah, if I only had a crystal ball. If you would have told me, Madison, that in 1995, when I was sitting around the boardroom table trying to put together a business continuity plan based upon a pandemic, I would have said, "You're nuts. We're never going to have a pandemic." So what could we possibly be looking at in the next 3 to 5 years? Honest to goodness, I don't know. I think we just need to be prepared for anything, absolutely anything. Whatever you possibly could think of would be the weirdest thing, then prepare for that, right? Because we just don't know what these fraudsters, what these bad actors may be coming up with next. We have a lot of discussion within the industry about artificial intelligence. I think that is going to be a factor. It already is a factor. Quantum computing, that's a factor. I probably lost some people when I said quantum computing because they're like going, quantum leap? Are we leaping into time travel? No, we're not leaping into time travel. But quantum computing is really super duper fast computers. And this is going to be, by the end of the decade, something that we're all going to know. Just like, I remember I did training sessions, again, back in the 90s, and I would say, okay, who can tell me what OFAC is? And nobody knew what OFAC is. Now everybody knows what OFAC is. So we're going to come to a point where when we say AI or when we say quantum computing, people are going to know what that is. And I think those are factors. But what should you prepare for? Prepare for the worst. That's all I could say.
Yep, I'm on it. I agree. Absolutely. That's the theme of the past 5, maybe more years. Prepare for anything. Prepare for the worst. Well, Nanci, thank you so much for joining us. I know you have a ton of credentials and a wealth of experience to bring to payments and risk management, and I think this is a conversation that our banks are going to benefit from. So thanks so much for joining and sharing your expertise today.
Well, thanks for having me, Madison. I really appreciate it, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Correspondent podcast from Independent Correspondent Bankers Bank. We hope you've heard something that you can take back to your community bank. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review, or on Spotify, turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you next time, community bankers.